And Bobby wakes me up. He says, "You got that old so-and-so?" I said, I got him. Yeah. At 82, I do not look back on my career the way most fans do. People remember the goals, the records, the trophies, the banners hanging in Boston, and the noise that followed every puck I touched. That is all fine. But when you spend your life in the slot taking punishment, screening goaltenders, and fighting for every inch of ice, you remember something very different. You remember the men who pushed you, the men who changed how you prepared, how you focused, and how you handled pressure. You remember the players you truly admired, not because they were friendly or charming, but because they forced you to raise your standard. My era was not gentle. If you stood in front of the net, you paid a price. If you wanted to score 50, you had to take hits that shook your ribs. Hockey was a battle of intention and endurance. You needed power. You needed intelligence. And you needed courage to stay in the fight. I lived through years with Chicago, found my true prime in Boston, and later carried leadership in New York. And at every stop, the same truth stayed with me. Respect is earned only through pressure. That is why admiration matters. It is not about liking someone. It is not about friendship. It is about the rare players who force you to look at your own game and understand that you needed to be better. They were the ones who challenged your pride, your discipline, and your toughness. Before I count the 5 men I admired the most, you need to understand the kind of player I was and the mindset that shaped every shift I took in the National Hockey League. I was never the smoothest skater or the flashiest stick handler. What I had was presence. I planted myself in front of the net and refused to move. I built my career on screens, deflections, rebounds, and a willingness to absorb whatever punishment came with that territory. From Chicago to Boston to New York, that identity never changed. I earned scoring titles, a Hart Trophy, and a place in the Hall of Fame because I understood one thing better than most players. Goals come from courage and commitment, not comfort. The men I admired were the ones who made that truth even sharper. They challenged my focus, pushed my awareness, and forced me to play through fear, fatigue, and frustration. They showed me what greatness looked like up close and made me climb toward it every night. Now it is time to count them down. Number 5, Bobby Clarke. Discipline. When people talk about Bobby Clarke, they jump straight to the toughness, the intensity, the way he pushed the Philadelphia Flyers into becoming one of the hardest teams to play against. But for me, Clarke represented something much deeper. He understood the game with a level of discipline that you rarely see in any era. Every shift he took had purpose. Every decision he made had weight. He was not big. He was not intimidating in the traditional sense. But he controlled the pace of a game by refusing to waste energy or time. That kind of consistency demands respect from anyone who ever played against him. I admired Clarke because he forced you to stay honest. If you took a lazy stride or drifted for even a second, he punished you. He was the kind of player who made you skate the full length, who made you think about your next move 2 seconds earlier than normal. I scored a lot of goals in my career, and I scored them against the best defenders and goaltenders in the league. But when Clarke was on the ice, I had to work harder for every inch of space. He read plays like a coach and attacked mistakes like a predator. There was no room to breathe. I said it more than once in interviews. Clarke was one of the smartest competitors I ever faced. People remember the fire in his eyes and the chaos around those Flyers teams. But the real story was how disciplined he was within that chaos. He knew exactly when to press, when to pull back, when to disrupt the rhythm of a scorer like me. He was relentless without losing control. And that balance is something only the best players ever find. Facing Clark meant you had to be fully committed from the moment the puck dropped. You could not coast. You could not rely on talent alone. You needed to match his heart, his timing, and his willingness to push beyond fatigue. He made me prepare harder, think sharper, and respect the value of structure in a sport that often explodes into unpredictability. That is admiration. Not comfort, not friendship, just pure respect earned through battle. Number 4, Ken Dryden, composure. Ken Dryden was the one man who could make the entire arena feel quiet without saying a single word. He stood in that crease like a wall carved out of calmness. And every time I faced him, I understood why Montreal kept winning. I admired a lot of players, but Dryden was different. He did not beat you with desperation or wild movements. He beat you with stillness. He made the net feel smaller and the moment feel heavier. When you stood in front of him, you sensed that he was not going to break before you did. I said many times in interviews that Dryden was the hardest goaltender for me to solve. It was not because he was flashy. It was because he refused to panic. I made my living off rebounds, screens, and chaos around the slot. But Dryden had a way of removing the chaos. He waited you out. He watched through traffic like he had a second set of eyes. Even when I got position, even when a shot deflected off a stick or a shin pad, he found the puck with a calmness that felt unreal in a league built on speed and pressure. There were nights I would leave the ice and think I had him beaten, only to look up and see he had stopped everything. You could hammer shots from every angle and he would swallow them like they were routine. You could drop into the slot for a perfect tip and he would absorb it without flinching. I built my game on putting pressure on goaltenders until they cracked. But Dryden did not crack. He held the moment steady and forced you to feel the weight of every decision. He also changed how I prepared. Other goalies made you think about positioning or timing. Dryden made you think about patience. You could not rush against him. If you rushed, you lost. If you hesitated, you lost. You had to find the perfect balance between instinct and control. And even then, he might take the play away from you with a simple shift of his shoulders. That kind of composure is rare. It is something most players never master. Montreal trusted him because they knew he steadied the whole team. When a goaltender stands tall and stays calm, everyone in front of him plays bigger. Dryden gave the Canadians that backbone. They pushed forward because they knew the crease was secure. That is what I admired. Strength without noise. Dominance without boasting. Facing Dryden meant accepting that the game was not going to bend your way just because you wanted it. You had to earn every shot, every rebound, every chance. You had to outthink him, outweigh him. And sometimes even that was not enough. To admire a player is to acknowledge the truth. And the truth is simple. Ken Dryden made me better because he made the game harder. Number 3, Bobby Hull, power. Bobby Hull was the first player who made me understand what true physical force looked like on skates. People talk about big shots and fast strides, but Hull had something beyond that. He carried power in every movement. His stride exploded off the ice. His shot came off his stick like it was launched from a different world. Even before I became a scorer, known for camping in front of the net, I understood that no matter how strong or determined you were, there were players whose raw force simply changed the game. Hull was one of them, and he did it night after night. I admired Bobby Hull because he set a standard for what power hockey really meant. You could not take a shift off against him. If you did, he made you pay. I remember games where he would cross the blue line, wind up, and the entire bench would tense up because everyone knew he could beat any goaltender clean. It was not just the speed of the puck. It was the violence of the release and the authority behind every shot. My job was to find space, take punishment, and score in the dirty areas. But Hull reminded every scorer in the league that there was another way to dominate. I said many times in interviews that Hull had the most dangerous combination in the league. Speed, sizet, confidence, and a shot that made defenders look smaller than they were. He did not need to outthink you. He overwhelmed you. When you faced him, you had to commit your whole body to blocking lanes and forcing him outside. Even then, it often did not matter. He could beat a defenseman wide or cut inside and let the puck fly before anyone reacted. The thing I admired most was how simple he made the game look. He played with a purity of intention. Skate, create space, fire. There was no clutter, no hesitation, no fear. That clarity was something most players could never reach. I spent my career building goals in tight areas, using screens, rebounds, and messy plays. But Hull could transform a shift with one stride and one release. He also changed how teams defended. Coaches planned entire systems around slowing him down. Defenders gave up their comfort just to keep him away from the middle. Goaltenders shifted deeper into their crease because they feared the blast from the wing. You know, a player's great when the league bends around him. And Hull was that kind of presence. Facing Bobby Hull demanded humility. You knew he could overpower your best effort. That is why I admired him. He represented pure force, the kind that made you tighten your grip on your stick and prepare for something you could not fully control. Number 2, Brad Park. Intelligence. Brad Park was the kind of defenseman who forced scorers like me to think differently. I admired a lot of players, but Park earned a special place in my mind because he understood the game on a level that very few ever reached. He did not rely on brute force or intimidation. He beat you with timing, angles, and an intelligence that felt almost unfair at times. When I faced him, I had to think 2 steps ahead. And even then, he often closed the door before I arrived. I said many times in interviews that Brad Park read plays the way great quarterbacks read a defense. He could see where the puck was going, not where it was. He watched your shoulders, your hips, and your stick plate. And from that, he built a map of your entire shift. That kind of vision made him dangerous in a silent and calculated way. You did not realize he had you until you were out of space and out of options. Park was not dirty. He did not need to be. His strength came from efficiency. When I battled in the slot and waited for a rebound or a screen, Park used his body with a precision that forced you into uncomfortable positions without crossing the line. He pushed you when nobody else saw it. He sealed gaps with small steps that felt like they came from instinct. He had a calm physicality, the kind that disrupted your rhythm without ever letting the play look chaotic. What I admired most was his ability to stay composed under pressure. When I stormed the crease, most defenders reacted with panic or aggression. Park reacted with structure. If a puck bounced loose, he knew where to be. If I spun for position, he adjusted without overreacting. He played with a confidence that came from understanding that he did not need to overpower you. All he needed was the right angle, the right step, and the right read when he joined me in Boston, that admiration only grew stronger. Playing with him instead of against him showed me how deep his hockey mind truly was. He made our team smarter. He made me smarter. He pushed everyone to think about hockey as a game of awareness and precision, not just grit and heart. You could feel the ice tilt when he controlled the tempo. It was like he had a quiet command over every shift. Facing Brad Park forced me to evolve. He made me value intelligence as much as strength. And he taught me that the smartest players often leave the biggest impact. That is why he stands at number 2. His mind elevated his game and forced mine to rise with it. Number 1, Gordie Howe. Awareness. Gordie Howe was the complete hockey player. Every era has its stars, its scorers, its grinders, its leaders. But Howe was all of them in one body. I admired many men in my career, but Gordie stood above the rest because he understood the entire ice surface better than anyone I ever faced. Awareness is what separated him from everyone else. He knew the flow, the pressure, the timing, and the emotional temperature of a game in a way that made him feel almost supernatural. Facing him was not just competition, it was education. I said it in interviews many times. Gordie Howe was the gold standard. He had strength, skill, and intelligence. But what truly defined him was how effortlessly he could adjust to any situation. If the game needed finesse, he gave finesse. If the game demanded power, he delivered power. If the moment required patience, he waited with a calmness that made opponents uneasy. He understood hockey like a craftsman understands his tools. His instincts were sharp, but his awareness was even sharper. When I came into the league, I wanted to score goals. I wanted to make a name for myself. Then I faced Gordie Howe and realized there was a level beyond talent. Every shift against him forced you to measure yourself. You could not hide. If you tried to slip into open ice, he would cut off the angle. If you tried to pressure his line, he held the puck until the perfect second, then moved it with a quiet confidence. You felt like he knew what you were thinking before you committed to it. His presence was the thing you never forgot. He did not need to shout. He did not need to posture. You felt it in how teammates behaved around him. Red Wings players stood taller because Howe was on their bench. Opponents tightened their grips because Howe was on the ice. He set the tone for the entire sport. That is awareness taken to its highest level. I admired him because he played the game with full control. He did not panic. He did not hurry. He made decisions from a place of absolute certainty. And when a man plays that way, he becomes impossible to break. I tried to outwork him, outposition him, outthink him. And every attempt felt like running into a brick wall built from hockey wisdom. The respect I carry for him comes from how he shaped the game itself. Every player who came after him, including me, measured greatness through his example. He taught us what it meant to compete with pride, with skill, with class, and with a fierce understanding of how the sport should be played. Gordie Howe stands at number 1 because he embodied complete mastery. Awareness, strength, intelligence, presence. He was a model, the one we all chased, the one who made hockey feel bigger than any individual shift or season. That is true admiration, the kind that never fades. Looking back on my career, these 5 men stand out. Not because they made my nights easier, but because they made every shift harder. Bobby Clarke forced discipline into every decision. Ken Dryden taught me that calmness can break even the strongest scorer. Bobby Hull showed me what true force looks like when it is unleashed at full speed. Brad Park proved that intelligence can shut down power more effectively than brute strength. And Gordie Howe set the standard for complete awareness, the kind of mastery that shapes an entire sport. I admired these players because each one pushed me into a deeper understanding of my own game. They exposed my weaknesses, tested my pride, and made me commit even harder to the identity that defined my career. Admiration is not about liking someone. It is about recognizing the truth in front of you. These men were the truth. They were the players you prepared for days in advance. They were the ones you remembered long after the season ended. Hockey during my era was demanding, unforgiving, and honest. Respect did not come from words. It came from battles. It came from standing your ground. It came from facing players who made you better even when you did not want to admit it. That is what these five gave me. Now I ask you, if you watched that era, who were the players you admired the most? The ones who shaped the way you saw the game. Tell me your list.